Well, let me go ahead and kick this off. If anybody else is joining us, it can kind of join in at a little bit later time. As I've done several times throughout today already, I got the distinct honor and privilege of introducing our speaker for this session. And if you didn't hear me say it before, just want to share a couple things about her because I've gotten to know her a little bit over the last week, trying to set everything up. When reached out to me, I knew she was coming to our district for our conference, and I was super excited, especially when I found out a little bit more about her background, some of the stuff that, her heritage and so forth. So without any further, let me kind of introduce our speaker. She was born and raised in Scotland and has lived throughout the United Kingdom before relocating to Germany, where she now lives with her husband, David, and their dog, Jana. She holds a master's degree, and she is a visionary leader. I've learned that over the last few days. I was super impressed with how she approaches things. She's committed, ready to work to create a future together in Toastmasters with all members. Proven leadership, has a proactive approach, vision with openness, power with humility, fortitude with wisdom, genuine concern, as I said, for the members. And one of the things that I've always said throughout my Navy career and even after when I ran my own business is everything rises and falls on leadership. So without any further ado, please help me welcome to speak to us today about leadership in the 21st century, the past district governor, regional advisor, past international director, current second vice president at Toastmasters International, distinguished Toastmaster, Morag Mathieson. Ma'am, the floor is yours. Morag, can you hear us? I don't know if we've lost audio or video. Who's my Zoom master in today?
She's muted.
Oh, Morag, you're muted then, dear. Can you unmute?
I don't think she can hear you.
That's what I'm wondering because it doesn't seem so.
She's not speaking, so even if she's unmuted, she's not speaking.
I'm not sure because we just had her. Maybe in the chat. Let me try that.
She is not muted.
Did you introduce her and tell her to start speaking?
Yes, and apparently we've lost. I don't know if she can hear us.
Oh, okay.
She said no.
I can't hear you. I don't
Now
know if
we
you
can hear you.
Oh, there she is.
Can you hear us, Morag? Seems like I could hear her, Kelly, but she can't hear us. For some
Yeah,
reason.
she said she could hear. So actually,
Someone says you can hear me. I'm
Yeah.
hoping that's correct.
We can.
Yes.
Yes, I see a
Yes.
thumbs up from RJ. If RJ gives me the thumbs up, then that's good for me. Excellent. So we're ready to go? Yeah? Yeah, okay. I don't know why I can't hear you. I know why I can't hear you. I switched on the mute on my laptop. That's why I can't hear you. Usually that's the way, isn't it? Great point. Okay, so when Dawn first said to me, we would like you to speak about leadership in the 21st century, my first reaction was to think, but 20% of the 21st century is already past. Surely that's an old topic. But I began to think about it again, and I began to realize that although 20% of the century has gone, actually, we're probably in this huge time of leadership transition. And so thinking again about the leadership of the 21st century, actually, is very relevant to where we are. So kudos to Dawn and whoever else decided that this was a good topic. That's my conclusion too. But I want to ask you a question, and I would like you, if you can, to type in the chat your answers to this question. And then I'm going to ask Kelly to read out some of those answers, maybe not all of them, for us. If you think about the leaders of the 20th century, what would you say were the hallmarks of those leaders? When we think back, that assumes, of course, you knew.
Passion,
Yeah.
innovative, service, original, courage, persuasive speaking, compassion, community, Angelica Merkel, Germany, vision, integrity, flexibility.
That's embracing change, really. Ooh. So let me share you a story with you about my first boss after university. I trained as a pharmacist, and I was managing a retail pharmacy store. And we had a problem. We had a problem in that the heating broke in the store. And I called my boss this day and I said to him, the heating's broken, it's rather cold. Are you okay if I go ahead and call a company out to fix it? And he said, how much is it going to cost? And I said, I have no idea. And he said, well, you need to get me 3 quotes. Now, this was the month of February in Scotland, which is a cold, cold month. And he said, maybe you have a temporary standing heater from home that you could bring in. Really? I could bring my heaters from home? Well, actually, no, I don't have a temporary standing heater from home, but we find a way to do this. And I remember day after day, we were waiting for contractors to come and give us quotes. And an elderly lady, as she took a prescription from me one day, said, oh my goodness, you feel like you're dead. Because I was so cold. And my staff were the same. And I decided, you know, I've had enough of this. I've only got 2 quotes. He insisted on 3. I don't have the 3rd quote. I have a choice to make here. I can either operate a store that's freezing cold, where all of my staff were freezing cold, and where my customers were freezing cold, or I can just go ahead and make the decision myself. I made the decision myself, and then I got the biggest telling off of my life for not getting that 3rd quote. The quote I chose turned out to be the cheapest of the 3 quotes, but I'd stepped out of line. I didn't have the authority. I wanted to act in the best interests of my customers and my staff, of us all, but that wasn't the point. There was a hierarchy. There was a command structure. There were decisions to be made that were not mine. And I always think about that experience for me as being one of the big differences of the 20th century. And just in case you wonder, that was late 80s when I came out of university. That was the kind of time frame we're talking about. So when I think about the traditional leaders, the traditional alpha leaders of last century, I think about people of great vision who see the big goal, because we saw some amazing things happen in the 20th century. And I saw those leaders as people who could influence and motivate. But at that time also, there was so much that was about profitability, that was about hard-nosed business tactics, that was about sales at any cost, which pushes you in the direction of considering ethics. Is profit always the primary thing? Is prosperity the most important thing for an organization? I wouldn't say it's unimportant, but I think that's one of the things that characterizes this shift from 20th century to 21st century leadership. Thinking about that shift to 21st century, if we think about some of the things that have influenced change in this time, we're in different days now to the 20th century. Those boom days of the 80s and even into the 90s, those big shifts then, we've left that behind and we're really in a different time. And even more so in these times of pandemic, I think we're in a time of further transition. And I might say a little bit more about that. So the things I think that have influenced change, and I think you might think of some more, and if you do and you want to share those in the chat, that's great. The first of those would be the dot-com phenomenon, because that really opened up new markets and it opened up new ways of doing business and created a job title that we hadn't heard much before, and that's entrepreneur. I was in a club meeting this morning where someone actually introduced herself. Who are you? What do you do? And she said, I'm an entrepreneur. And I smiled and I thought, we never heard that. People used to just be teachers and salespeople and whatever else. But titles like entrepreneur, we never heard. So the dot-com revolution and the advent of entrepreneurs and the growth of startups really are much more agile, and they've created all kinds of new ways of developing products and of selling products. And this affects the models of business that we know. The second influencer of change, I would say, is technology. And technology has really disrupted our world. Technology disruptions have become so frequent that they've become our norm, and they've made change happen incredibly quickly. I remember sitting in a Toastmasters meeting a few years ago now and listening to one of our club members give a speech that was all about 3D printing. And it seemed as far away as Jupiter does. I couldn't have imagined what that would be like. And yet, if I go to the grocery store where I shop, they have a 3D printer and I can have things printed. We see in the medical world 3D printing being used to produce new components. We see it being used in electronics, in the building of houses. That technology has happened so fast, and there are so many different kinds of that. A third influencer or driver of change has been social media. Social media has revolutionized how we communicate, and it's brought a lot of considerations about safety. It's also brought considerations about how we speak to each other. If we think back not so long ago, we had a more distant relationship to people we didn't know. Today, because of social media, we feel like we know people that we really don't know at all, because we see them there, because we see their opinions. It's also given us a platform to communicate with the world and to share ideas and connect, and to see just how small the world has become. It's made our world much, much smaller. I see someone shared the idea about innovation and globalization, and that has surely been a part of what has been driven through social media. I think how we live and how we work has also brought change. Think about the shifting demographics of our times, the change in the numbers of single parent families or dual income households, an aging population that puts huge demands on social and healthcare systems, and also about diversity in the workforce. Also, that changing demographic puts a big pressure on us to remain relevant in the products that we're developing and how we deliver them. And then the final influencer that I identified is change itself. Life has become quite ambiguous in many ways. It used to be much simpler. And if you're like me, you used to hear your parents or your grandparents talk about, in the old days, it was all simpler. I find myself saying that now because I think it was all a lot simpler. I think now we have a much more complex and shifting situation. And also all the political and economic disruptions that happen around us. You know, civil unrest can rise very quickly and change how we do things. Strikes in the labour force, you know, long term is not so long term anymore. We used to make strategic plans for 5 or 10 years out. Some people still do that, but they're less reliable. And in fact, in Toastmasters, this is one of the changes that the board made in the last year. When the board was getting ready to launch its 5-year strategic plan in August 2020, the board made a decision that 5 years is too long when you're in the middle of a global pandemic and no one has any idea when it will end or how we'll come out of this thing. So let's make a shorter term plan for just 18 months that we actually might be able to focus on and deliver. And I think the level of change around us means that when we look at short-term reports, so things like a quarterly report, understanding the narrative behind that, understanding the context becomes so much more important because we need to hold that vision of the bigger picture and the where we're heading so that we are not overly bound up by a short-term situation. As a consequence of all of this, I think we've seen an explosion of information and how we deal with that information, and also global shifts in economic power that change how we do business. And all of that, I think, impacts leadership. I hope you might agree with that. You know, it impacts both the leadership that we need and the leadership that we experience as we go through. Organizations expect new leadership capabilities, but yet they're still largely promoting traditional models. So many organizations that still have a hierarchical structure, and they still have a hierarchical mindset. And actually, they could be looking at developing skills and measuring leadership in ways that help their leaders to navigate the greater ambiguity that we see, to take charge of that rapid change that's happening, and to engage with stakeholders both inside and outside of organizations. I was looking at a survey from Deloitte, their 2019 Global Human Capital Trend Survey, and I thought it was quite interesting that they said the #1 reason that people quit their job is their inability to learn and grow in that workplace. And I thought that was fascinating because it's not always what we would imagine would be the reason. And I think it reflects that shift in values of leaders today. And I think it also reflects the times that we are in. So what about leadership attributes and skills of the 21st century? Well, these are some of the things that I think are important. Resilience. Resilience is really the cornerstone of leadership success today. With all those rapidly changing demands, the pace of disruption, the fads and the trends, how on earth do you keep up with all of this? It can be exhausting for organizations and for individuals. You need to keep your long-term focus, but you've got to manage the short term or there will be no long term. And all in all, sometimes we live in a very negative world. So keeping your focus and keeping your strength and taking care of yourself as a leader, I think, is what makes resilience the cornerstone of success. It is those leaders who are able to last, not those leaders who are the shining stars for a very brief time and drop back, that will bring any organization long-term success. I also think emotional intelligence is such a key thing in the 21st century. People today expect to have, and I think it helps them when they have, a higher level of self-awareness or self-mastery, self-management. You know, when you start to be able to lead yourself, you become so much more able to lead others. And when you have emotional intelligence, then you're able to deal with conflict. And we know that conflict is not always negative. Sometimes it's very positive. That conflict that brings us innovation or just a fresh start sometimes. Emotional intelligence also means that we become more able to receive feedback and to deal with innovation. Receiving feedback, I think, is also one of these big, big shifts in the 21st century, because I can't have imagined going to some of my early bosses and saying, let me give you some feedback on how this is going. They might have asked me occasionally, and it would have been very measured feedback they were given from me. But today, it's so much easier to do that. And we expect in some way to give feedback on certain things in organizations. And we learn to do that in a way that's positive and hopefully is nurturing. Psychological safety today has become such a huge topic that leaders, I think it's one of the things that a leader really needs to understand. And I think it is very pertinent to us in Toastmasters. Timothy Clark's work in this talks about there being the absolute minimum of psychological safety is inclusion. Whether that's inclusion in the conversation, inclusion in the workplace, or in a discussion. If people don't contribute and you see one person dominating, then it actually suppresses everyone else. So how do we as leaders create this feeling of safety? And if you remember, the club mission is about providing a supportive and positive learning experience. So part of that is about creating this place of inclusion where people feel like they belong, that they can speak up, that they can contribute, that they have a voice at the table. Also, part of psychological safety is about learning, and learning from our mistakes in particular, so that it's okay to fail. If we live in an environment where people just tell us off or we're punished for failure, then it becomes very hard to take risks. We need people in such changing times to be willing to take a risk and then to learn from that risk if it doesn't work out. Also, part of psychological safety is this ability to contribute, to bring your ideas, to learn how to express your ideas, and also when you're in charge, to allow others to share those ideas so that we don't shut down the possibility of innovation. And within psychological safety also, challenge. Do you have people that will challenge you and will debate and discuss without personally attacking each other? Because that's important, isn't it? I value you as a person. We might see the world differently, but I value you as a person. And I am going to cultivate this culture of discussion so that we can work things out, so that we can all work together towards the same goal in an effective and clear way. We also, I believe, leaders in the 21st century need to be learners. We're in a time where digital literacy is a big thing, and we need to get that and to be able to be literate in a digital world. We also need in these days to have big picture thinking, where in these times of change, we need leaders with a vision who see the possibilities of the future, but can then work on solving the problems of the present and can collaborate with others. There's a thinking that sometimes we get stuck. You know, sometimes we leave university or we're in a job where we've had a lot of investment in our learning, and then suddenly we stop. But the world continues, and if we don't continue, we get left behind. And whether that's a reading part, you know, I love to read, and I can tell you right now, our board of directors has a monthly reading group, and we read leadership books every month and then meet once a month to discuss them. And that's a great way of learning. But it's about finding what works for you. It's keeping your mind open to learn, but finding what works for you. Also really important for leaders today, I think, is purpose, knowing your purpose and the purpose of the organisation that you're part of. You know, we need to focus on results and so on, and we can all talk about the tangibles. We need to get, you know, 9 DCP points or whatever your club has set. We need to grow 5 more clubs, whatever it is. But what is your purpose? Your purpose is to empower individuals through personal and professional development. And when we do that, then the numbers often follow. So understand your why you do what you do, so that you can be fulfilled in your purpose and your organisation, wherever you're serving, can benefit from that understanding of purpose. And the final thing I have on this slide is about putting people first. And we've seen that be the big thing of this time, you know, putting the well-being of people before the planet, before purpose, and before prosperity. People first. Diversity is our norm today. Inclusion can be our choice. How do we include people who are different to us? How do we embrace cultural diversity and understand the differing needs of people? Millennials today make up about 30% of the global workforce. And they're different to the next generation, to Generation Alpha. They're also different to older generations. So how do we take care of our people in a way that makes space for all of them? And as I said, that survey from Deloitte says people expect to learn. So how will you invest in your people that keeps them up to date and feeling valued? We talked about the leaders of yesteryear, the traditional alphas. But what about the new alpha leaders? Well, I think new alpha leaders really have 3 main aims, and that is achievement. They want to see some kind of result or some kind of outcome. That's important to us as people. They want to feel fulfilled individually. So they want this focus on their well-being and happiness. They want to go home with a smile on their face. And then thirdly, they want to have an impact. Achievement is about accomplishment, but impact is about going beyond yourself. It's about making a positive difference in the lives of others and somehow having a sense that you have made an improvement or a betterment in the world. And there are kind of 3 big ideas that underlie this philosophy. The first is a commitment to personal excellence. So these new alpha leaders believe that strong leadership starts with looking inward. So that idea of personal self-mastery and self-understanding, and working to be the best versions of themselves. They also build positive relationships. That's the aim of fulfillment. If you want to do something bigger than yourself, then you will need to help people. You will need the help of people. And, you know, that's a great thing, to build your network and your connection and build those relationships, not to take advantage of each other, but to complete each other. And they also value character and ethics. Kindness and compassion really matter. Courage also in the face of difficult situations, but paired with humility. so that you are an active and engaged individual in your organization. They have this understanding of themselves and this purpose, this sense of purpose. They want to know who they are and to focus on figuring out strength and skill and passion. They want feedback because they want to improve. The traditional high achiever didn't want to show the chink in their armor, but today perfectionism has gone. People want to improve and build on excellence. And the ability to make things happen, well, it's easier said than done, really, isn't it? But if you are waiting for someone else to come along who has better credentials than you or more experience than you, then you might just be waiting forever, because change has to begin somewhere. And if you are in that position of leadership, then today you are the leader who has been given the opportunity and given the empowerment to make a difference wherever you are. Those are my thoughts on 21st century leadership. It's an enormous topic that we could talk about for a very long time. And I'm looking to Kelly because I think we may have a few minutes left in our session. And I'm very happy if anyone wants to share their views or have a question that they would like us to discuss.
Yes, we definitely have time for questions and discussion.
I see a question that's being posted in the chat, and it's a question about accountability. Who is accountable? Leaders, managers, team leads, people on the floor. In the USA, people leave due to poor management or corporate leaders. I think that's not just in the US. I think it happens everywhere, because when you work in an organization, your manager is the organization to you. And if they're not cutting it, then often that will be a reason to leave. So who is accountable? I think we're all individually accountable for ourselves. You know, we're given responsibilities and we are accountable for the responsibilities that we have been given. We have to walk the talk where we are. I see Farzana's hand is up. Farzana.
Morag, thank you for a great topic and a great presentation. This topic is very much what we need to address as in our organization also. My question is, you mentioned the Deloitte survey that the #1 reason people leave is that, and I think the wording was that they don't want to learn and they don't grow. I would paraphrase it differently, and I want to know if organization, and I'm not talking about Deloitte survey, but if an organization is not providing opportunities and content to learn and grow, then that becomes a recipe or a failure. So what do you suggest when people are in that predicament that they are part of an organization, and I'm not talking about our organization, but leadership in general, if they're part of an organization and they don't see a path forward in terms of learning and growth, but they have to work for the sake of livelihood, what are the options one can exercise?
The actual quote from Deloitte doesn't say that they're not willing. It says that there is an inability to learn or grow. And that could be for many reasons. It could be because the individual doesn't have the resource at their fingertips. It could be that the company doesn't provide it. You know, it has been the case in the past that some companies will only provide job-specific training. The first company I worked for, that was their thing. If I needed training to do something in my pharmacy skills, I would get the time off to go for that training, or they might even fund it. And actually, I was quite fortunate. They had a leadership development program, and I was one of a very select group of people that they invested in. And that was quite unusual. And then the next stage of that for me came when I wanted to study for an MBA, and I went and asked, would they sponsor me for an MBA? And there was no question of that. I had to fund it myself, which was expensive. Expensive also in terms of time when you're working full-time job and studying. And I saw lots of wee small hours, shall we say, over that time. But I think there are lots of things people can do. And I think Toastmasters is one way that we do learn and grow, by all of the things that happen there and the way that we go, for sure. There's also there's a huge wealth of stuff. So you can choose a topic. So I've been studying just recently some of the free courses that are around, and there's different universities offer these, like the MOOC courses, the mass online education, where you can study for a relatively short period of time. So I've been studying at the moment, I've been studying 2 weeks for the last 2 weeks, looking at emotional intelligence was one of the topics. And I'm also looking at mindfulness. That's the other topic I'm studying at the moment. And I think these are great things because they often give you access to people at the top of their professions who are speaking about their research and their work, and you can become engaged and you can learn more without any additional expense, apart from your own investment of time. I think when we learn, there's always an investment from self.
Mhm.
Whether that is your money or whether it is your time, but there's always something we have to give. It's how the world works, isn't it? You give to receive. You sow seed to have growth. And I think you have to decide for yourself, how important is this to me? How much am I prepared to give? And, if your company isn't providing it, then I would say you can either look for an alternative employer if that's an option for you, but you can also look beyond and try to find different ways. And the example I gave of the board book group is a great way. We've looked at all kinds of topics in different leadership books this year that just make you think fresh thoughts and new ideas that come along.
Absolutely. I think we all have to develop a lifelong learner's mindset, as you talked about the learner's mindset also. And it was the word inability, because I have seen companies who will only pick certain people to give them capability to learn and grow, and others, even though, but we have to have a learner's mindset. Thank you for the answer.
Absolutely. Thank you. RJ, and then Karen.
Yes, ma'am. Just a quick question. In your opinion, going to your topic, leadership in the 21st century, where do you see a lot of these company or corporate leaders, embracing the way things are going, and maybe even Toastmasters itself?
I think and I think some of this has come through pandemic times, because organizations have been forced to make enormous changes and make them very quickly. If we'd been having a conversation 2 years ago and I'd said to you, 85% of our Toastmaster clubs will be online next year, we would all have laughed, because we would not have thought that was possible. But yet within a few weeks of the pandemic being declared, that happened. And we proved to ourselves that we can make significant change quickly. And I think some of this season has been a freeing up for people and a recognition that lives have changed. I think working through this season where so many people work from home now, companies are looking at smaller premises. They're changing what they do because they have to. And I think we've all become that bit more human. I don't know about you, but in some of the meetings I've had for work, I've seen people's children, their animals, their laundry, all sorts. And we've just become that bit more human. And I think that changes everything when we realize that at the heart of it all, we are people, serving people, working with people. That's the basic of it all. And I think that shifts mindsets, because leaders have had to make decisions that they never imagined they would ever have to make in these times. And therefore it frees and it changes things. So I think that's where we're at with it, RJ. Yeah. Karen, congratulations
First of
on
all-
your election.
Oh, thank you. First of all, I want to say I really enjoyed your topic. I kind of feel I was in a role where there was no room for growth. If you were not a select few, there was no possibility that you would ever grow. That was why I joined Toastmasters. I joined Toastmasters to become comfortable having a conversation with someone I didn't know so that I could start preparing for sending out my resume and getting a job. That was my whole purpose. But there's a lot of things, though. I think our leaders are now seeing the soft skills or the importance of the soft skills that Toastmaster gives. And it shocks me that I would go to webinars put on by our leadership where they had been sent to thousands of dollars training programs over a year and come back and teach the exact same principles that Toastmasters gave. And they were the highlight of those programs. But having said that they chose to spend more money than what I did, they are at least starting to realize that there's a difference on how people work. They're starting to kind of take that into consideration, especially with people in my age group to our millennials. We work very, very different. We're motivated very differently. And I also noticed too that they're trying to figure out what motivates people. So I kind of feel that leadership in the 21st century has shifted more towards the soft skills, and the pandemic helped people realize that it doesn't matter if you have a 6-digit income and compared to your workforce, you're all kind of going through the same thing. So I think the pandemic actually gave people compassion and empathy for what their workforce is going through. And I also just want to say too that I think the people that went to those thousands of dollars training are starting to see the rewards of having paid my $100 a year training within Toastmasters, because they hold up people as being the poster child. And if someone is unable to convey their point, they strongly push people to join Toastmasters. Mm-hmm. So I think some of it that you need to be willing, you have to be a lifelong learner, but you also have to be willing to take that initiative if it's not handed to you. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks, Karen, for that. I think you make such a valuable point about all of that, and that's a really powerful testimony to your own experience and your own situation. I think today I actually came across a new word. I said to you earlier, I'd been at a Toastmasters meeting my morning, your middle of the night, and the word of the day was a word I had never heard before. And this word, you may have heard it, is co-opetition. That's how it goes. And this is where people who are typically competitors work together. And this is a word that we've not really needed so much before because we haven't had that experience before. And one of the examples we were thinking about was in the development of vaccines right now. The French company Sanofi are giving their capacity to Pfizer-BioNTech to produce their vaccine because Sanofi is not there in their development. And this would have been unthinkable in the pharmaceutical industry, in any industry really, that you would help your competitor in this way. But it is, I think, one of those symptoms of our time, that we have this willingness to work for the greater good so that mankind, the planet, the people of this planet are not disadvantaged by having to wait, that we will actually work for the common good. It kind of warms your heart a little when you see that. And my wish for us is that when this is all over, that we continue to build on those things, whether we will or not. Of course, that's going to be another question, isn't it? You know, the 79 years of this century that are still to go, who knows what the hallmarks of leadership in the latter part of this century will be. And I think our world is in a time of transition right now. And I think part of that is the leadership transition from what we had before to this. We knew it was good to take care of our people. We knew that we should be more collaborative. We knew that we should do so many things, but actually it's only now that we're having to do those things, or we're choosing to do them because we are moved as people by the situation we're in, and because we're having a different experience and we're having to face up to challenges in the business world like we haven't seen for some time, and having to deal with those.
One question that was posted was, how much do you work with corporate and university clubs?
Me personally?
I guess so. I think it was directed at you.
Okay. I don't, if we're talking about Toastmasters clubs, I don't work very much with university Toastmasters clubs at all, because we don't have many here. And in fact, we don't have any in my home district at all. So I haven't worked a lot with them, but I have worked quite a bit with different corporates in different sectors. I think it's a huge topic. As I prepared for today, my real desire would actually not to have presented anything to you, but just said, let's talk about leadership today. And of course, we didn't know how many people would be here, and it's very hard to do that, because then you end up with only a few people having the opportunity to get involved in the discussion if we have lots of people. But I'm very grateful to all of you who have brought questions or points to the discussion. And I hope that you would be encouraged to keep thinking about your own leadership in different circumstances and how you might evolve that over time.
We got time. I got one more real quick question for you, if it's okay, Morag.
Sure.
And I'm just going to kind of touch back on something I tried to instill this year as a district director, all my division directors and everything. And I also did it throughout my Navy career. It's just something that I was very empathetic to others and tried to be that way. But one of the things I feel that, especially in the 21st century, that might be missing a lot of times, and I've often said this, is leaders have to be able to shift leadership styles at any given moment in any given situations. Would you mind talking to that for just a moment?
Sure. It's absolutely necessary that we respond to the circumstances we're in. And sometimes we hear people talk about the kind of command and control type leadership has no place today. Absolutely, it does. There are circumstances when that's exactly what you need. If your building is on fire, you don't want a leader who says, let's ask everyone what they think is the best way out. You want a leader who says, we're going this way now, and I'm going to make sure everyone gets there. That's exactly what you need. And of course, that's one extreme example, but there are circumstances when you need to do that. And there are circumstances when you need to provide more direction than others. And some of that is driven by your team. So if you are working with a brand new team, so right now in work, I'm working with a group of people where the administrative facilitator for that group is brand new. It's the first time doing this role. So my asking her, how should we do this, is not really helpful to her right now. But I know in a couple of months that I will be asking for her. I'll be asking her, do you see a better way to do this, or how does this work for you? Right now, what helps is when I'm very clear about this is what we need from you and this is how you're going to contribute. Whereas with others, it's quite different. You know, you have to have that shift. You have to have those times when you're tough. You know, this type of leadership and the times we're in does not mean that you can't be tough as a leader, because sometimes you have to be. What you have to be is true to yourself. You have to be absolutely authentic. You have to be ethical as a leader. I think for me, that's an absolute given. You know, we have to be ethical as leaders. Why would anyone choose to follow you if you were not ethical? So I think, you know, there are some fundamentals in there, but then after that, you as a leader, and I think this is core to good leadership, is you have to understand the situation you're in and you have to get to know the people you're leading. And so what is the style of leadership that you are going to bring to that situation that helps everyone work all their way through? And I'm sure you've experienced that, RJ. I don't know if you want to share with the group of any situations you've had this year in district leadership where you recognize, oh, I'm changing my style here or my approach.
Well, absolutely. I might say that, you know, a lot of this was easy because I just looked for talent and leaders and skill sets. And all I did was just, if it was in their strong suit or their, you know, we all have our weaknesses and strong points. And I would just call upon them and say, hey, you know, we could really use you, instead of asking, say, we really use you and the district needs you, because I think it'd be great for this right now with what, you know, your background and your skill sets and everything, you'd be perfect. And I was amazed at how people would step up and take over the reins. And at times, just like I've done all throughout my three different careers I've had at my age, is where I was sometimes a coach, sometimes I was a cheerleader, sometimes I was the authoritarian, like you're talking about. You know, there is this is the way it's going to be because I'm responsible for everything. But at the same time, I always relied on, you know, basically listening and just going, okay, do you know of a better way? In fact, my division directors to this day will tell you, I said, if you come to me with a problem, come to me with a solution. Don't just come to complain. Let me know whether there's a possible solution to this that we might implement or a way to go about implementing it. So yeah, there were so many different times, and I was constantly shifting gears just to whatever it needed, because there were some times where a lot of our newer leaders that are stepping up and everything just felt unsure of themselves. They weren't confident. And a lot of times all I had to do is say, no, you're doing a great job. I share one quick note, and I know we need to start wrapping this up because I tend to get a little long-winded, but there was one incident where we basically had a division director kind of drop out of sight. And this wasn't this year, but in the past. And I went to one of the area directors, or actually, no, she was just a club member at the time, one of the club officers. I said, you know what? You'd be great at this right now. Nobody else is stepping up. Would you mind chairing the contest for the division? And she did. Of course, she was always, I'm not sure. And I said, you got a committee, rely on, just let them run with it. She'd come to me with questions. Well, at the end of it, she came back and she said, thank you. I said, for what? She goes, I'd have never done this had you not pushed me in that direction. And now she is just an abundance of confidence. So yes, I think that's important. So that's kind of what you asked me to share a little bit of what I've experienced.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. I can think of many situations like that where sometimes people don't believe in themselves. And as a leader, you need to be just giving them that nudge in the right direction. Someone said to me quite recently that one of the big differences in leadership in the 20th century to the 21st is that in the 20th century, people used to say, a leader would say, go. And in the 21st century, a leader would say, let's go. And I think that's a real subtle difference. And it's a thought I like to have, because I, as a leader, would prefer to say, let's go. But if I give the burning building example, then sometimes you still need that go moment. But hopefully you would choose for most of the time to speak about let's go with your team rather than go, so that you take people with you. I think we're about out of time though, aren't we? Are we out of time?
Yes, we got about 2 minutes. I didn't want to cut Kelly off, but we've got about 2 minutes. to the-
Actually, this is Carl. I'm from Gilead. I'm in California, actually. Essentially, one of the paths I've chosen was motivational strategies, because like you said, we have the old timers, the middle timers, and the young ones, and it's hard to motivate them. And I think that the boss would say jump, and we would say how high, and the young people would say why, right? So, there's a different response. And in America, you're from Scotland, so you probably don't know, but Bobby Knight was a coach at Indiana, and he was he was actually a coach in the Army, the military, before he became a coach, right? And he was very successful with people like Larry Bird and Isaiah Thomas. But one of the hardest things, and I think what we need to teach in Toastmasters, is how to motivate your workers, right? And we can say we, but a lot of times I hire a person. I actually work for Gilead, which is the company which manufactures Veklury, which is the one approved COVID-19 therapies, right? You hire someone because he's a subject matter expert. So there's no way, the CEO of a company is going to do the work, right? But important with human resources is you hire the SME, they need to do it. And, just like Toastmasters has the core value of teamwork, corporations need to have teamwork. And, you missed the speech. I don't know if you attended the colors presentation on personalities, but we actually, at our company, we actually, pay a lot of money to have Myers-Briggs, because to get people to be able to interact, to work together, it's very important that you understand not only leadership styles, but communication styles, because, sometimes the best teams don't work. And I think being in Europe, and you realize that on the World Cup, when you get all these players that play on all the, professional teams, when they come in and play for Scotland or the UK or Germany or even Brazil, to get all these quote superstars to work together as a team doesn't always work. So I think, one of the big challenges that Toastmasters, more than communication, is how to lead teams, because that's the most important thing. And even government, in America right now, we have two parties and they're not working together, and it's essentially, tearing our country apart, right? So
Hey,
not
Carl,
only does
Carl, if I may, sir, I hate to cut you off, but we're running right into the next educational session. I do appreciate it, and thank you, Morag, for all your speech and everything. But it is now 3 o'clock, and everybody needs to move on to the next educational session you had planned on attending. Thank you.